What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Eye on the U, the Miami Herald's podcast about the University of Miami Hurricanes. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, joined once again by our beat writer, Jordan McPherson. Jordan, we are back after a wild Friday night. I mean, a little surprising what a dogfight it was, but the play at the end. We're going to recap all of that for you in this show today. Go back and look at that wild finish at Hard Rock Stadium as the Hurricanes just barely kept their undefeated season going with a victory, a 38-34 victory over Virginia Tech that went back and forth in the final seconds. And we're going to talk about not just that, but the way Miami kind of escaped that game even before the crazy play, some of the big moments, key plays that set that play up in the first place, set up the comeback that Miami had to make to stay alive. We'll talk a little more about Cam Ward, of course, the way he responded, the way he led that comeback. The importance of the win for a team like this, obviously coming up with a lot of key games in the next few weeks in ACC play. And then we'll talk a little bit about this road trip. They're heading over to the West Coast to play Cal for the first time in a long time, so we'll break down that matchup. And College Game Day is going out there, Jordan. That one threw me off. I couldn't believe that they picked that as a site. I thought they'd have Miami at some point, but later down the road. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, College Game Day news surprised me, to say the least. I mean, just finished wrapping up with everything. Was at the Panthers game, actually, their preseason game that Saturday night. And as soon as I finished with that, I see the news that on ESPN going, "Oh, game day. I guess I got to write something here."
Yeah,
it was one of those things that caught me off guard, but hey, it's a good thing. It's the first time Berkeley's ever having it in the 26 years that Game Day's done it. Obviously, UM's a top 10 team. Cal's off to a pretty good start themselves. They're 3-1. Their only loss was that little bit of a grinder slog of a game against FSU, which now that's saying that if your one loss is FSU, that's kind of saying something in and of itself, I guess.
Right.
But still, they're 3-1, their first year in the ACC. Miami's first game going to Cal since 1990. They're a top 10 team.
Right.
And we've seen the atmosphere and the energy Cal's fan base has been bringing this season with everything on Twitter, with them ragging on all their opponents. So it should be a good vibe out there, a good atmosphere.
Yeah, it should be a fun game. Definitely, you say a little bit of a slogger. No, it was a big time snooze fest. I mean, I saw some of that game, and it was not pretty. FSU escaping with their first victory. But let's talk about how Miami got through this one. I mean, just the final play itself, Jordan, one of the wildest things I've seen in a long time. And I'm sitting there. I see Horton come up with the ball and run off, and then I see the referee signal touchdown, and I'm thinking to myself, oh no. Please let this not be a screw job that Miami has had some in the past. I'll be honest. I'm going to say it. Miami's been hosed in the past, as many Canes fans know, by referees. But I was hoping this was not the case. They looked at it. I think the right call was made. When you look at it, the ball dancing around and the way he was landed outside, out of bounds. But you were there in person. Just tell us about how crazy that was.
Yeah, that was wild, to say the least. I mean, you see just the play. It's a Hail Mary. It's all or nothing there. All I saw in the moment was a group of like 7 players all going for the ball at once. I didn't know where the ball was until, like you said, Horton came running out with it. And then when they ruled it a touchdown, I thought, please just tell me they're saying this just so it triggers the automatic review. That was my thought process. Because if a player comes up with the ball and runs out with it, I think, okay, that team got it. It's over. And then when you saw the replay, no one ever really had full possession of the ball once they got towards the ground. That ball was moving the entire time. So the right call was made in my mind. And honestly, it probably shouldn't have been ruled completion in the first place. But the way the ACC explained it after the fact in a statement was a UM player who was already out of bounds was touching it while all of the chaos was happening, which automatically rules the ball dead. That was the ruling they ultimately came up with. So in the end, the right decision was made, even if the process leading up to it had some gray area to it. And then also got to bring up the fact that the referee, who was the main guy this week, just happened to be the same guy who was the ref for the Duke lateral touchdown play back in 2016, I believe it was, when they had the 8 laterals. So obviously the conspiracy theories are going to roll wild with that one. But overall, Miami, the right call came out at the end of the day on the final play. Miami was able to escape with a win where they had to come back from being behind 10 points on 3 different occasions. And we're going to go break into a lot of the plays, but that led to that. But in the final moment, this Miami Hurricanes team found a way to hold on to the win, which, as we've seen in the past, probably a lot of Miami Hurricanes teams who were put in that situation, whether it was that final play or moments before it, probably wouldn't have come out of.
Right.
So,
yeah.
This team.
It's interesting. You could look at it that way. You could look at it the other way, too, of why was Miami in this dicey situation. And when you look at the game, pretty fortunate that they did have at least the chance to come back. I mean, to me, you have Elijah Horton's, the chase down tackle after the Ward interception. That was a huge play. That's why you don't give up on plays. The fake field goal attempt was just bizarre to me. Like, just the fact that they didn't kick the points right, get the points right there. If they had, who's to say Miami's not even in that situation at the end? Then we're talking about a much different situation going over to California with a loss, the disappointment of thinking, all this great start is out the window now after what would have been a disappointing loss to Virginia Tech. All that, the fact that they went for that kind of bailed Miami out at that point in the game a little bit, but then it took some incredible ones. I mean, the chest pass, the catching it on, throwing it on, catching on the ground. Then the important one to me too, and I said it. I think I even said it. I was watching the game, and I told my wife at the time, I go, look, everybody's made this big fuss about Cam Ward for our deserved reasons. Here's where he has to win a game for them. This is the first moment he has to win a game for them. And granted, it came down to that crazy play, but he put his team in that position to win, and that was good to see.
Correct. Now, I'll go back to Cam in a second. I'm going to go back to the Arroyo fake field goal. All of that happened in the span of 4 plays. It was right. Arroyo chasing down the guy, running. I think he was about 80 yards. He was on the opposite sideline when the interception happened.
I think I said Horton or Arroyo. You
said Horton,
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Well, Horton was involved in both the game-winning touchdown and the.
I had Horton in my mind. I'm still seeing him run off with the ball. That's why.
Yeah, but Arroyo, I believe he ran about 80 yards combined to be able to track the guy down. Mario Cristobal said he topped out at 21 miles an hour on that run, and for a tight end to be able to get to that speed, trucking down 80 miles, that's pretty freaking good. Yeah. So for him to have the hustle there, and then 4 plays, and then the defense forced the 3 and out, and be able to sniff out the fake field goal and anticipate it coming, that in of itself was dominance. Yeah. And then again, Ward, they're down by 10 at that point. Ward leads 3 straight touchdown drives to close it out for that offense. He has the 17-yard scramble. He has the pass to Cam McCormick, and then I'm still processing that final offensive drive where, like you said, Xavier Restrepo on 4th and 3 slips, falls on his back. Cam Ward just lobs it to him like they're playing hot pocket.
Yeah,
like you're playing hot potato, and Xavier Restrepo just falls in his arms. Everyone in the press box looked at each other and went, "What the insert your expletive of choice here?"
Right.
And then the Riley Williams, the chest pass. It was just chest pass. He broke past 2 sacks on that play, and that was in order for him to be. And again, that's where his elusiveness is so valuable. I mean, and just his mindset of, okay, I screwed up early. I made mistakes. I turned the ball over 3 times and gave up 14 points, potentially could have given up 21 if that interception was returned for a touchdown, or even if it was 17, if they go for the field goal instead of the fake.
Right.
He found a way to just mentally clear his mind and go like, okay, is there time on the clock? I've got a chance. And that's the value that you have with Cam Ward. As long as there's time on the clock and there is a window, no matter how small it is, for him to make an impact, to be able to help win the game, his team is still in the game. Again, he ends up with 4 touchdown passes, rushes for a 5th, and they found a way. And it was, like you said, it was the first time we saw Ward in that situation at the University of Miami. He put himself in that position and he got himself out of it. That was what was impressive to me. It was, he made his mistakes and then he said, okay, I'm going to put it on my back to make sure that those mistakes don't cost us this game.
Right. And that's the good. That's definitely the good. And you love to see that part of it. But the bad, the ugly part is what led to that, the mistakes. And you hope that he can correct those mistakes. You hope he doesn't make those mistakes going forward, because when they face a better team, now Virginia Tech is not bad. Virginia Tech has looked, they have talent. Their quarterback is very good as well. And I think they're going to be one of those teams that people will be surprised may end up on the upper half of the conference this year. But they're going to face better competition when they go to Louisville. They're going to face a couple of these tricky road games down the road. He can't afford these mistakes because they bailed themselves out of it. And that's the worrisome part, where you wanted to see how Miami would respond in a conference game at home, a little bit tougher situation than they had been the first 4 weeks. Mixed results, if you look at it. They came out with a W, that's important, but mixed results. And then so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle what's coming up.
Yeah, mixed results, definitely the best way to describe it. But I also, to look at it on the other side of it, is you want to see how your team plays through those. Because, again, they haven't really had to play through those during the non-conference league. So now you at least have some tape to see how this team does respond, which if you're able to get that with a win, that's twice as great. But like you said, they need to make sure that they learn from this. They don't let the mistakes repeat. They don't let anything linger, anything fester. You don't want a repeat of this, but now at least they know that if they get into this situation, they know what they're doing. They know how to get out of it. Because, I mean, we can look back just as recently as last year. They go 4-0 through conference play. The Georgia Tech game happens. They don't respond from it. And then we saw the rest of the season spiraled. Right. So even though it was a clunky game, you have to win your clunky games. I mean, look at what happened with Ole Miss against Kentucky last week. Again, they lost. Yeah, again, those type of games happen. So you need to, even if it's a game that you should dominate and you only win by 3 or 4, you still need to find a way to win those games.
Yeah,
it happens. Win those games, reset, and go. Because, again, college football, we know how wild of a sport this is. So you take your wins where you can get them. You definitely hone in on what went wrong in those wins and correct them. But this team isn't going to feel sorry for itself or basically try to discredit any win they get, because they know that this game easily could have been flipped. So they're going to take what they can and move forward with it, but obviously still have to figure out what needs to improve to make sure they don't get themselves in these situations too often.
And it does happen. I mean, look, you mentioned Ole Miss. I mean, look at Notre Dame a few weeks ago. It happens to all these teams that have a target on their back. Now Miami has a target. I mean, they're plain and simple. They're a top 10 team, and people are gunning for them, especially conference opponents like that. A rivalry. I mean, we forget Virginia Tech was a big rival. I mean, that's been a good rivalry. Those two teams have been a good rivalry for a long time. And it showed. It showed that what can happen in that type of a game, in that type of a setting on a Friday night. So it's good to see that there's a value to surviving and moving on, and like you said, and Miami did that this week. But they're going to have to face that a few more times coming up. And then I think that's a perfect segue to talk about this game against Cal, because, yes, Cal struggled last week, couldn't find any offense, settled for 3 field goals against the Seminoles, against a struggling Florida State team that has not been able to get any offense themselves going. But look, they went out there and they took an L, and now Miami heads out there. It's a cross-country trip. Those aren't easy. It's a night game. You know, ACC after dark, you know, the new era of the ACC with the West Coast teams for us. I can't remember the last time I stayed up this late to watch a Hurricanes game, but we're going to do it on Saturday night. The last time Miami went out to Cal, 1990, like you mentioned before. This was during the era of Craig Erickson. Dennis Erickson was the coach. It was a battle that year too. I remember they went into the fourth quarter. They were only up by a touchdown in that game before they pulled away. Maybe it's that type of game this week, and you know, obviously, you know, 34 years later, but we have this new Miami team. But again, the circumstances in terms of the logistics, the travel. Let's see how they respond to this latest obstacle, and tell us a little bit about the matchup. But we got a local kid, obviously, at quarterback for Cal, Fernando Mendoza, the Columbus grad, leading the way. He's had a decent start to his season, but interesting matchup for Miami.
Yeah, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback. Jaden Ott is arguably one of the best running backs in the conference. So this is going to be the 3rd consecutive week where Miami's facing a very potent rushing attack. They handled themselves against USF, not as much against Virginia Tech. They missed way too many tackles last week against Virginia Tech. I think Pro Football Folks had them at about 23, 24 missed tackles in that game after missing, I think, 22 the entire season. I think that was the stat I read. So their big guys have to clean things up this week. Francisco Malinoa missed a couple, one of which that led to a long touchdown run. Mish Powell missed a few. Elijah also missed a couple very close pressures in the backfield. So they need to clean up their tackling when it comes to the Cal game. But just the logistics overall, this isn't just their first game, their first road game where they're traveling out of state. But like you said, it's West Coast. They're going through 3 time zones. So, and It's a 7:30 p.m. local kickoff time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff time. So by the time this game ends, it's basically going to be 2 o'clock on the East Coast. So these guys are usually well at home, well in bed, or getting rested. They're done with their workday. So the fact that they're going to be playing this late, it's going to be a lot of body clock adjustment. The team's actually traveling out on Thursday instead of Friday. They are going a day early to help get their bodies regulated, and they've been pushing practice back about an hour each day. So this way they're finishing up their stuff later in the day so that their bodies are getting closer to being where it would be for game time when everything kicks off on Saturday. And just the matchup itself, it's going to be an interesting one. Again, I'm interested to see how Miami handles doing what they're going to do on a true road game where they're outside of the Sunshine State. This is their first real road time actually having to do the full road experience. But it should be an interesting game if the offense cleans up its mistakes from the first half against Virginia Tech and the defense plays a little bit cleaner, and they're supposed to be getting Ruben Bain back. I'm knocking on wood until I actually see him line up because we've been hearing this for about 3 weeks now. But if Ruben Bain does come back, that should help mightily with both their pass rush and the run defense. So that would be a big boon for them, and we'll see where things go from that vantage point.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. We haven't seen Miami completely at full strength yet, too. Especially like you said. I mean, Ruben Bain was amazing last year. The impact he had on that defense, and we're talking the team that isn't as loaded as they are this season. So I'm looking forward to see what he can do. Like you said, run, not just a run stopping, but the pass rush, get pressure on Mendoza, and maybe force some turnovers on Cal. It's definitely one of the keys to the game. Disrupt them, because I think this Cal team on the offensive side, like you said, they depend a lot on that ground game. So if you could take that, if you can neutralize that early and kind of establish yourself, get a couple scores ahead, that's huge, especially on the road in a night setting like that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And also, I'm just going to point out, which I'm going to be writing about this in a little bit, guys on this team have some experience with this Cal team. I mean, you look at a bunch of their transfers who came in. Cam Ward played at Wazoo for 2 years. Mish Powell played at Washington. Francisco Maliola played at Wazoo. So these guys know, even if it's not all the same players, Coach Justin Wilcock is still there. So they know his scheme. They know what his teams usually look like. So even though this Miami team hasn't played Cal since, I believe it was 2008 in the bowl game and then 2000 at Berkeley, they have some guys who at least have some inside knowledge of what to expect schematically, which should be able to help them when things get going on Saturday.
Yeah, that experience definitely should play very good into Miami's hands, hopefully, when you look at a matchup like that. But let's talk a little bit about the overall what we saw in the ACC. I mean, that interesting developments. Like I said, like they lose that game coming up this week. Clemson, a big one against Florida State. The Seminoles winning that game last week. Can they knock off Clemson, or does Clemson stay on course? I mean, this is interesting in Miami, how it's developing right now. Miami, this game, a week off, a huge one at Louisville, but you're starting to see the conference kind of, some of the teams, it's very early, no doubt about it, but starting to kind of take shape a little bit as to who might be the top teams we're looking forward to down the road for the ACC championship. Yeah,
I mean, right now it's Miami and Clemson are the top two. And then, I mean, Louisville lost to Notre Dame last week. The Fighting Manny Diaz's are 5-0 right now. They came back to beat UNC.
Just barely.
Just barely, but again,
yeah,
win is a win.
A win's a win.
Win is a win is a win. Who would have thought, if I said this at the beginning of the year, there could be a chance on November 2nd when Manny Diaz's Duke team comes down to Coral Gables that both teams could potentially be undefeated?
Wild.
Who would have thought that?
Yeah, and very. I know we're saying very loosely a chance, because I know Duke has some good ones still between now and then that could knock them off that undefeated tier. And heck, we're talking about Miami. Not even looking past Cal this weekend, but the Louisville
Miami
game.
is this week at Louisville, and Florida State is their 3 before the Duke game.
Right.
But still, hats off to Manny Diaz for what he's doing out there. SMU getting a couple big wins. SMU looking like they're handling themselves in conference play thus far. We'll see where everything else goes. But again, like you mentioned back at the top, Virginia Tech, they're a very sneaky 2-3 team right now. Yeah. They are a very sneaky 2-3 team. Again, they played Miami close. If their run game keeps going the way it's going with Bashan Tootin and Antoine Roland Powell keeps racking up the sacks, they're a force to be reckoned with. They're a fun team to watch. I will say that. And they were very intriguing. And again, I kind of laughed it off when Francisco Malignolo from the Hurricanes said, this is a good team. Their 2-2 record is pretty deceiving. And I was like, they lost to Vanderbilt and Rutgers. How good can they be? And then I see them show up and it's like, oh crap, they actually are. They are pretty legit here.
I couldn't believe that team. I said the same thing. I couldn't believe it. Like, how did this team lose to those teams? Because they're talented. They have some good. They have, Drones is a good quarterback. They had a good. They looked good in this game. Inexplicable to me. I mean, well, it's college football can be that way. I mean, look at Boston College. I thought Boston College looked great the first few weeks. Then they have kind of a clunker last week that they survive. It's wild week to week. And a team that we're not mentioning. I mean, I kept saying FSU beating Cal, and I keep forgetting that was a couple of weeks ago. Because this past week, SMU is the one we're not talking about. Rhett Lashley's team has one of the most potent offenses in the country. Forget about the conference, the country. And they shredded FSU last week in that game in Dallas. And that's another team that can't be taken lightly when we talk about the ACC race.
No, definitely not. No, Rhett's done a really good job. And again, also there's the little bit of the jab that goes with that from the whole FSU conference lawsuit thing about why are these teams coming in? They're beneath us, this, that, the other, and then get rolled by said team. So again, that's something that did cross my mind as I was watching that game on Saturday night.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, we'll wrap this up talking a little bit more. Just looking at this matchup with Cal, what other key matchups are you kind of looking at? I mean, I know you, like you mentioned before, Cal's running game, a big key to stop that for Miami. But who else or what other key thing are you looking at in this game? Any individual matchup or just something that Miami has to do to come out with another victory?
I mean, for me in general, I just need to see how the offensive line responds from last week. I mean, again, Markel Bell still having to hold down left tackle with Jalen Rivers out. He obviously got exposed by Antoine Roland Powell last week. Hurricanes gave up 3 sacks after only giving up 3 sacks all season heading into last week. The run blocking in particular has not been good. And as a result, the run game hasn't taken off, which when you have a Damian Martinez who has proven himself, a Mark Fletcher who's coming off a great freshman year, a Jordan Lyle who was really impressed as a true freshman, and you're really not getting much from that group, really needs to start seeing the run game going, and that starts with what they do in the trenches and the offensive line setting them up for success. They haven't done that yet this season, and they're going to need that sooner rather than later so that teams aren't just focusing on Cam Ward, which is where defenses are going to start just honing in on if they know that the Hurricanes run game can't do anything regardless of what a defense does. Right. So they need to start. As much as Cam Ward's success has been carrying them, they do need to find a way to strike some more balance in this offensive attack.
Yeah, because they did get traction from in the running game those first few weeks, but against the opponents that they did.
Yeah, no, and also the majority of it came in the second half where it was it was like 2 big runs. Like you look at the USF game before Jordan Lyles ripped off that 91-yard run, they had 70 rushing yards. Right. So half of their rushing yards came off one play. The week before against Ball State, A.J. Allen ripped off a 71-yard run. And that was about like 35-40% of the run production. So a lot of it is off of 2, 3, maybe 4 plays. They're accounting for like 30 to 40% of their rushing offense right now. So if you take those numbers away, it's not pretty. It hasn't been good. And again, you have a guy like Damian Martinez. He came in averaging close to 6 yards a run over 2 years. He's not averaging anywhere close to that right now. I think it'll come from it. It should come from eventually. He's too good of a back for it not to come for him. But it's just if there's been a disappointment factor so far for the Hurricanes team this season, it's been that to this point.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair point because, like you said, it can't all be on Ward. You can't do it as great as he is. You can't put all on him. And let's be honest, they're not getting to their ultimate goals unless they get the running game going because they're not going to they're not winning the conference. They're not beating Clemson without a good running game. And of course, beyond that, no chance at all if you're going to even try to contend against some of the elite in the nation if you do get where you want to get to in the playoff. But yeah, this has to get going. This is another good opportunity this week against this Cal team. So we'll be back next week on Eye on the U to recap what happened on the West Coast, and then we'll look ahead a little bit. Miami with a little break in between. Maybe we can talk a little bit talk some recruiting in the in between as we wait for the following game, a big one at Louisville. But until then, we thank everybody for watching Eye on the U. Jordan and I back and have revamped and revitalized, restarted this show with our new cast here, and we're looking forward to documenting this hurricane season for you little by little, and other hurricane sports too. We'll start maybe mentioning some of that as we get closer to basketball season and maybe some other sports. I know the Canes volleyball team is having a great year so far. They've been pretty good. They're ranked in the top 25 right now. So we'll give a few shout outs, and then we'll talk a little hoops down the road. But mainly right now it's football season. This team is undefeated, and exciting times at the U for sure. So we're going to be back next week to talk about how it went at Cal. Until then, for Jordan McPherson, I'm Andre Fernandez. Thank you for watching Eye on the U.